Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Welcome to another episode of The First with Dr. Sandi, where we discuss the firsts of remarkable individuals like Wendy Perdomo, a woman whose journey is inspiring, and if you're an immigrant, very familiar and poignant. Wendy is the firstborn daughter to her parents after a heartbreaking tragedy. Her mother lost two sons and a brother at the same time in a drowning accident in the Dominican Republic. This profound loss set the stage for Wendy's life, where she became the pillar and strength of responsibility for her family. From a young age, Wendy was thrust into the role of navigating complex systems like banks, healthcare, and education, becoming the voice for her hardworking immigrant parents. This early exposure to leadership and advocacy not only sharpened her skills, but also instilled a deep sense of confidence and independence. That is why she became the first in her family to get a college education, the first to become an entrepreneur, and to coach other women. Today, Wendy channels these experiences into her hard work as an executive coach and leadership trainer, focusing on women's empowerment. You can find Wendy at coachingwomenofcolor.com, and her email is wendy@coachingwomenofcolor.com. Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Sandi. My guest today is Wendy Perdomo, and I'm just going to let Wendy tell you all about herself and some of her firsts. So let's get started here. Hey, Wendy.
Hey, Sandy, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really excited to be joining you today and for your listeners to learn a little bit about me. My name is Wendy Perdomo, and I am an executive leadership and life coach. My business is Coaching Women of Color. It's been around for 7 years. It is the thing that I love to do the most after being a mom is serving and being a servant leader. Specifically, the practice is dedicated to the executive coaching and women's empowerment for women of color leaders, women of color who find themselves in workplaces or in their businesses, and they're seeking to move up the next level, pivot, move from what I consider to be just ideation and thinking
Yeah.
about making the leap, but finally making the jump, right? And you need some really strong accountability. I'm your gal. I also am a certified disc facilitator, and one of the things that I absolutely love to do and adore is an opportunity to see teams working effectively. So, in addition to working one-on-one with women, I also enjoy very much the business of supporting teams and becoming effective teams because what I know from being in the leadership space over 20 years is that we're not taught how to be effective as teams,
You're
right?
not.
Teams like you get thrown together and hope for the best. And so, by way of the DISC tool, which is the most commonly used assessment tool right now in the world, I have teams create an opportunity to get a breakthrough and get ahead of those snafus and things that kind of get in the way of people, really being able to do the mission-driven work or the
Right.
business of the business. So yeah, that's a little bit about the work that I do. And in terms of my first is I was the first one born after a tragedy in my family.
Tell me
And
about the tragedy. What?
yeah. So I am the eldest of three daughters. And my parents are Dominican immigrants to this country. And my mom met my dad, and they were dating at that point. They weren't married just yet, if I recall correctly. And my mom had had two sons, three sons at that point. And it was, from what I understand, back in September 1972. So this was 2 years before I was born. And my grandfather in the Dominican Republic had large property, like lots of field, fincas or farms, as they call them. And the boys were about approximately 8 and 9 years old. And boys are mischievous. I have two boys myself, so they're different than raising girls. So I was born in a household full of girls, so I know what it's like to be
Me too.
raised by girls and in a girl household, but I ended up having boys, right? And so boys by nature tend to be more mischievous than females. And needless to say, as far as what I understand from the tragedy, they went off to just, roam the farm, and they went off with some workers because there was some work being done on the farmland, and they got close to what was a river, and they did not know how to swim. And they went on something that was like a raft, but obviously a raft kind of floats, but it
Right.
was not something that floated. And so the three of them went off onto this raft thinking, playing like kids in the water, that they would actually that it floated, and
That
it
it
did
floats.
not,
Yeah.
right? And unfortunately, they all drowned, both my mom's children with her brother, all three. And so I have been the first one born to my mom after that tragedy happened, some 52 years ago now. Yeah.
So how did she like overprotect you?
Wow.
I could
Yes.
only imagine. I
Yeah.
could only imagine if that happened to me and I had a child after, they would not, they'd be tied to like my back with a rope
Yeah.
around my neck.
Yeah. So, you know what? To her credit, I'm gonna say two things about that. I mean, first, yes and no. I think she had a very, what I would say, her childhood was one where my grandfather didn't let her go out a lot, and she had to kind of push her way and be rebellious and mischievous herself. So wonder where her kids got it from. But needless to say, she didn't want that for us. And although I was raised in Harlem in the 70s, 80s, which was at the height of the crack epidemic, right? And they would have had every reason to keep us once she maybe she saw something in me in a high school, and we'll talk a little bit about how this first impacted me in terms of who I even am right now on this planet. But, I think she saw who I was, like in terms of my sense of responsibility. So as a kid going out, and since my sisters were just maybe 4 years behind, she made sure we all went out together, right? So that's the one. She wasn't too restrictive. She was in the beginning, but then she started to loosen up. I grew up in a household where everything, and they maybe in the African American community they call it like the African proverbs and sayings.
Yes.
Dominicans call them refranes, which mean like it's the same thing as sayings. And so what my mom would do is every time I wanted to go out, she had a saying. So the one that she would always say to me is, Cuando las hormigas se quieren perder, alas les suelen nacer, which means literally when ants want to get lost, they will spring wings. Like
Wings.
they will learn, they will have wings, right? And so that was the thing. Every time I wanted to go out, she's like, "You're trying to get lost out there." And I was like, "Here she comes with these refranes." But eventually, Sandy, she loosened the reins, right? She could have kept us
Yes.
locked in and been
Yes.
like, forget it, given where I was raised, the time period I was raised, and her own trauma. So to her credit, she did let me go out. One or two times she did show up. She was
Yes.
like, and I was like,
Well,
oh my
that's a regular mother. That's a
God.
regular mother. They're gonna
One or two times she showed up. But the thing I had to bear and grit was like hang out with my middle sister. And my middle sister was cool. So that we were good. Like, she would come along. And then when my youngest sister got old enough to start to come along, she tagged her on too. So we grew up with a buddy system, right? We grew up with a fierce buddy system as women who you don't go out by yourselves, you don't leave each other. And
right.
we kind of inculcated that with our own friends. And so that's kind of what I think the trauma precipitated for her was much more, if you're going to go out, protect yourself, make sure you take care of one another.
A lot of women, even my friends, I think that's prevalent, that buddy system. When we go out, we stick together. If we
Yep,
say I'm ready to go, you should be ready to go too. Not no
absolutely.
man left or woman left behind.
That's right.
And I there were times when I had some friends who said, "No, go on and leave me alone. Go on and leave. I'm not ready to go." And usually there was a boy involved. But we'd be adamant, you know,
Yes,
you
you
just,
have to
no,
be.
we have to go. We came together. I'll sit here and wait, even if it's gonna get us in trouble, right? We'll sit here and wait
Right,
until you're ready to go because
right.
that's just, I don't know if they still have that today.
I don't know. I don't see it as often, and again, I'm raising boys, and so they, are a little bit more independent or try to be. I always tell them to make sure that, if they feel unsafe, even as boys and as young
Yes,
men who are becoming into their own manhood, to make sure they let somebody who they know who's nearby, who's
correct.
safe to them. So that way, or, if you came with your friends, leave with your friends. And also like my oldest right now is in college and I'm like the back listen, like the back whatever that's like you could call me. I'll drive down there.
Yes.
And make sure you activate your community, people who are safe beacons that you can reach out to because you must be safe
And
because yeah.
I think especially when you're the oldest girl,
Hmm.
you were the first girl.
I was.
Mom
Yes, I
and
was.
and the oldest of three now. So she lost her two sons, and then here you come. Was there a lot of responsibility that you took on? Because I
Yeah.
know as the first girl, I'm a first girl. I'm a middle
Yeah.
child, but I'm the first girl, and definitely there's responsibility that comes
Oh,
with that.
absolutely. As the first after the tragedy, the oldest of my three sisters, it comes with huge responsibility. And I think one of the things that was so pivotal for me is that I felt like I had to grow up so quickly. Right?
Yeah,
Like I was already learning how to write a checkbook when I was 10 years old.
yeah,
Because again, my parents are immigrants to this country. They didn't dominate the language. And so they were trying to navigate the various systems in order to be able to provide for their
correct.
family, which included different bureaucracies, including the housing system. I grew up in the New
Yes,
York City Housing Authority, anything that had to deal with translation, their own medical encounters, right? Like going to the doctor with them, going to the bank with them, making sure that I filled out forms for them, making sure that I was the translator when there was any financial inquiries related to my even
yes.
tuition. So that led me to have to grow up really fast because I had to be in adult
The translate.
conversations and translate much sooner than I would have, had to otherwise.
And that's so common, especially I know in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, and all my friends were Wendy's.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were all translating for their parents. I mean, thankfully, my mom's Jamaican and she speaks English, but my friends who were from other countries, whether India,
Hmm.
Brooklyn's a melting pot, right? Like, who can't you find here? I think in my public school there was like 100 different countries or something. My public school.
New York is like that. And I think, like that is both a blessing and a curse,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because Latinos right now are the largest, population.
Population.
And so what ended up happening was that we were getting documentation and she was getting mail in Spanish.
Right.
But she was choosing not to read it. She was like, I'm not smart enough. You already know. I'm like, you go ahead and read it. And
Well,
I became what I've always like to give it to Mikey in the family. Like she
yes,
can do it. She's gonna read it. She can like to the point where mail would come in, she would hold it so that I could actually
read
review
it.
it and tell her like, here's what you need to do.
Right.
Even in the instances, Sandy, when the information was in Spanish, which I would then try and push back and say, well, it's in Spanish, Mom, you could read it. She's like, I no,
Yeah.
no, no, you do it. And
Yeah.
so it became this thing where it was almost like a job.
It is. It is a job. I mean, I didn't have to translate, but my mom worked three jobs. And so it's the
Right.
same thing. You're the oldest girl, you're running the household. I mean, I had an older
Mhm.
brother and a younger sister, but I was telling someone the other day that I don't really cook that much anymore. And when I met my husband, I'm like, I don't cook, but I really do cook. But I've got so tired of cooking. Because when you're the oldest child, your mom's at work, she comes in, she's got to get something to eat, then she's got to leave back out again to do her
Wow.
night job, right? Then she has the weekend job, and I had to cook.
Yeah,
Had to
you're
cook.
adulting.
I know 20 different ways to make ground beef.
Yeah. Right. It's quick, easy, edible. It'll be done
Exactly,
soon.
exactly. Spaghetti, pizza,
Yep.
hamburgers, all the different
Meatballs.
ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so we had to do supermarket. I know how to balance the checkbook.
Hmm.
She actually balanced her checkbook, but she would sit with us on Thursday nights, which is when she got paid. And all the bills go on the table, and she taught us. I was telling someone, I remember my little sister used to have to put the phone book. People, there was such a thing as a phone book before in
I
my
know. Before, yes, we're dating ourselves. That's
yeah,
right.
and it's very thick. And she would put two phone books so my little sister could sit at the table
Oh,
with us, to go through the bills and ask, like, what do you have? You have dance class, or my brother had soccer, or
right,
whatever, what's to be paid. And we'd sit there. I learned how to manage that from very young with my mom. And all my
right.
friends were doing it because it was just such an immigrant thing. I
Yeah,
guess for you to do that, you have a
yeah.
certain pool of money. And I didn't really see that with my American friends, truthfully.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
I would
like
see that with others.
it for me, like that level of being involved in my parents' translation, interpreting, going with them, it started my advocacy work, right? Like it
Mm.
start like because they were the first people I had to advocate for, where
Yes.
I didn't have a choice, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
like having to advocate for whatever it was. It could have been something related to the housing, or it could have been something related to their doctor, or something at the bank. Whatever it was, it became an advocacy for me to speak on behalf of them, because they could
Right.
not, right? They didn't have the language skills to be able to say what they needed to say. And so now, I've thought back to how this sort of even servant leadership, this work that I do, where I love to support women of color
People.
in ensuring that they are showing up powerfully, not only in their workplaces, but in both in their personal and professional relationships. Like, speak
Yes.
your truth, finding means of ensuring that, I say closed mouths don't get fed. Like, if you're in a toxic environment, be that a work environment that's not serving you, how are you navigating your relationship capital, or places for you to exit that, so that your
Yes.
well-being is at ease, right? You're not walking into a place where your central nervous system is constantly overwhelmed. And
So do
so,
you give the ladies that you coach, do you give them the verbiage to do that, to speak? Because a lot of times I find women in that situation just don't know what to say, like the
mhm.
right ways to phrase things to make it to their benefit, right?
Yeah, I mean, each situation is different. Sometimes it's courage, right? Sometimes it's reminding them of their own power. Like, I have had the privilege and opportunity of coaching countless women of color who are very talented, very capable, very accomplished, have the alphabet soup, and are feeling that they have to stay in a organization that is not serving them because they've been there very long, or they feel like they have ties to the leader or
Yes.
to the entity in some way, not knowing that that very skill set that they have, that has put them where they are right now can catapult them someplace else, right? Like, and so it's about reminding them of their power so that they can utilize that to exit a situation that's no longer in service of them. It could be any circumstances, a change in leadership, a change in the focus of the organization, a change in the people they're working with, so that they can find a place that more readily suits who they are and who they
Right.
choose to be as they grow. So yes, it's sometimes the courage, reminding them of their power. And sometimes if we have to script the narrative and sit and have the conversation and
Right.
role play and, like do the mirror work and, like give yourself time and grace and rehearse so that you feel that you are embodying the persona you need to be as in order to be able to cross the finish line in that conversation, then we will do that. Absolutely.
No, I understand because I used to do the same work that you do as a coach. And especially, I've been in that position, and coaching used to be a dirty word for me. Like, you're in corporate, they give you a coach. It's almost like giving me a spy.
Mm,
Right.
mm,
At that time, when there was
mm-hmm,
to be a coach, you
mm-hmm.
didn't trust the coach. You thought whatever was said to
Right.
this coach is going to get back to your
My employer.
VP or senior level person or whatever, and it will be used against you. So that's how I felt about coaching in my life.
Mhm.
And later on, it was when I started my company, I actually got a coach. And I'm like, this is really helpful. If I had embraced it fully when I
Mhm.
was in the corporate world, I might have gotten even further. I mean, I had my own little advisory board,
Mhm.
and
As you should.
I have my own little group of people that I can get together, not just one coach. But I
Right.
started thinking of it as, yes, I would need a sounding board, someone to talk to if I felt at the time that I had confidence in that person,
Mm-hmm.
and I probably would have gone a lot further. I mean, I was a director in a financial services company, but I could have gone even further. And actually, I didn't really want to because I liked my what I was doing.
Sure.
There are women out there who that I've spoken to and given them the same tools or similar tools to what you have or what you're giving your people. And it's amazing how as women we hold ourselves back for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different reasons. Could be family.
Yeah.
I don't want to take a job that's going to keep me there all night. I don't want my kids, I have to be able to take my kids to class or pick them up from, like, we have all these constraints
We do.
that's in our lives as women that men just don't have. Or I should say the majority of men, maybe there are a few now, but the majority of men don't have that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I see that sometimes when I am in coaching relationships and I have to remind them to put their face mask on first, right? Like we are
Yes.
often as women
Yes.
socialized to be nurturers, to be givers, to sacrifice, to put ourselves at the bottom. And then we cannot fill from an empty cup. By the time we want to access something for ourselves, we're so tired,
Tired.
right? We've given to the job,
Sure.
we've given to the leader, we've given to the project, we've given to the partner, we've given to the kids, we've given to the dog, we give to the family, extended family, and we don't necessarily sort of take stock. And so to live a life where you put yourself at the top of the pyramid and start to first source you, what do you need? What are your morning rituals? What are your morning mantras? How is your intentionality for the day? What are you doing for self from a movement, just from a mindset, from all the ways in which you need to caretake for yourself? And then be let that abundance source your giving to others. That's a
Yes.
different way to live, right? From abundance versus that depleted state or that
Yes.
limiting that energy that's exhausted or burnt out because you've done so much for others versus yourself. So it's a lot around shifting that paradigm of what we've been taught or what we see when we work with women, so that they put themselves first. So yeah.
Yeah, and this is called the first for a reason because
Yes.
we want we want you to always put yourself first. So what are some of the things that made, you or your family happy now that you're the first one, first girl to be born? How do they celebrate those kind of things with you?
So that's a
Or
beautiful
did they?
question.
Or did
Yeah,
they?
yeah. I mean, like the first, born after the tragedy, came with a first responsibility for many things, right? And I was also first, I think I was the first one in my household to go to college, right? And so it just, again, like this being the first in the way that my parents, like it created that servant leader in me. Like I just had a huge sense of responsibility, of just leadership acumen that I think has pretty much served me well in my life, right? So I do utilize that from the perspective of the work that I do on a day to day, but even in my family, right? Like as I, was a model for my sisters. My sisters are all we all got out of Harlem. Like I would hope to think that me being one of the first to go out of like the projects, and I ended up going to Colgate University. I got a master's there, and then I pursued two masters. I'm sorry, I got a bachelor's there. Then I pursued two masters, one at Baruch, through a public administration, through a fellowship called the National Urban Rural Fellowship. And then I also did my Master's of Science in Education through Baruch as well, their School of Public Affairs. So,
That's one of my old schools that I went.
yeah, yeah, alma mater, right? And so Baruch is a wonderful institution. And then my second sister, my middle sister, she went ahead and left as well, and she went to Mount Holyoke. And my sister is the vice chancellor for student academic affairs for the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She ain't never come back to Harlem. So she's the first, to reach that level of, that's a pretty high
Yeah.
role for
Yeah.
us, and then my youngest sister, she went initially to Plattsburgh and then ended up graduating with an economics degree in Pace University. And she now works over as an event manager for MGM. So she has her own event planning business as well. So we all, like, I think me sort of setting the stepping stones to leave a
Right.
community that was marginalized, although there was lots of love in my family. There wasn't when I was growing up in Harlem, there was some good and some bad, right? Like the way the families looked out for one another, I would say there was a sense of community that I don't know that exists right now. But understand that I was growing up in Harlem in the late 70s, early 80s,
Maybe.
which was the height of the, like I said, the crack epidemic. There was a lot of graffiti, a lot of drugs. AIDS was, kind of
Yes.
making it
Correct.
into the scenes and becoming much more prominently known. And so, like, and so, there was the whole safety thing. And so we were sheltered. My parents weren't trying to let us go out like that.
Right.
And so, but nevertheless, we did grow up in the neighborhood, and, we made it out. And I think that's one of the things to be celebrated, that now we can go back to Harlem, that my parents still live in the same
So
community that
there.
I was. Yes, they are. They love it there. And the community is changing somewhat, right? Like, and so just to be able to sort of leave and now be able to come back and enjoy Harlem in a different way. I love, although I don't currently live there because New York City is so exorbitant in terms of pricing and it's just crazy. Um,
I still live in Brooklyn,
I
which
love the
is so
diversity of it. Yeah, Brooklyn is one of the places I definitely want to like, it's on my Instagram list of places to, and I've been to Brooklyn, but like just there's so many up and coming places to go. Like you can
yes.
never, New York City is just, a tapestry of diversity and it's like literally a mosaic of everything and
But
anything
what
you
I
can
like
possibly
about it,
think of.
it also has its neighborhoods, right?
Yes. And that's,
So
yeah,
I don't see that as much in other places because just
facts.
in Brooklyn, you have the Jewish community, the Jewish
Yep.
neighborhood. You have the West Indian, well, West Indians are 90% of Brooklyn probably, but you have all these little enclaves of
Absolutely.
different types of people. You
Hmm.
go to Coney Island that way, and it's all the Russians and
Yeah.
everyone has their little community, but the food, oh my God, this is a place where you can come and pretty much just
The-
chow down. And I think also what I like about Brooklyn, everybody eats everything. Like we don't care if it's Russian, like what do you want to eat tonight?
Right.
You
You're
have
willing to venture out and try it out. Yeah. Yeah.
African food. There are tons of West Indian food, but we're like,
Yeah.
we get that at home. So let's try Indian or
Yeah.
Chinese, like all these different
Yeah. And
things.
that's and on Harlem is very much the same way. I
Yes, it is.
literally just tried a restaurant that down the block from where my parents are. That used to be a bodega for years, and now it's a beautiful sort of, place to eat and just enjoy the vibes. And so that's what I, love about being able to return back home now. So yeah.
So what are the things that you didn't like about being the first?
Oof. I think the thing that I would say is I think the thing that stands out is I grew up really fast, right? When you're a 10-year-old and you're sitting here and you're writing checks and you're being taken everywhere to go and be sort of like this figurehead for your parents and a
Yeah,
spokesperson, even if you don't necessarily have the mental sort of yet
capacity.
capacity. Like there were times where I was like, I don't know how to say that big word in English, or like I let alone and then translate it back to Spanish. So where I felt stuck, right? And I felt like it created this sense of like frustration in me as a young girl, like and a need for perfectionism and doing things right, which, as an adult, I pretty much right now promote a lot of progress, not perfectionism. For a long time, I mean, I am all about Black and brown excellence, don't get me wrong, but I don't deal well with mediocrity,
Yeah,
right? And so that's one thing. And I think just growing up so fast, like it creates this, like um seriousness about you, right? Like, so
you
and that's
do.
not to say like this younger girl that, could have played more, but I had to be more of a dominant figure. It served me well to be a leader,
Correct.
but I also think as I think about myself, like I'm also a serious person, and so I think when you have to grow up so fast and play is not necessarily so much a part of your day to day, you have to find the ways in which you have to activate play in your life as an
Yes.
adult, right? Because we are worthy of that. As adults, we still are worthy of having joy, of being playful. And I think when you grow up so fast, those are the sides of you that you got to kind of put down a bit because you have to grow up and you have to deal with grown-up things like, being an advocate and translating and,
Like I was
filling
saying
out the
before,
financial aid and all
yeah,
this stuff.
even with that, just the day-to-day household things, right?
Yes,
You're the ones doing the cooking, like I was saying before, you're the one
absolutely.
running the household. Make sure your sisters get up on time to go to school on time. Like these are
Right.
parental roles, typical
Yes.
parental roles, But and we don't blink an eye because that's what we know.
Right.
Every person we know that's an immigrant, that's your mom's friend, your aunt, that is the role that your peers, cousins, friends, they're all doing the same thing. So it becomes the
Right.
norm for you.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that when you are like what you just described in this space of doing so many things, you normalize this multifacetedness, like doing. And you really have to learn how to be still and how to be at peace, and that you have the right and the capacity to just rest, and that rest is restorative and rest is your birthright too. And you don't have to do all these things. And so,
I'm just learning
because
that. I'm just learning that, Wendy.
yeah, no, I
I'm
know, I
just
know. And
learning that.
because we're socialized to do so much for others and to always be doing and we're working on something, this notion of stillness is not something we know or has been an access point for us that we have to then as adults find the way to create, right? Like there are moments, Sandy, that on a Sunday and I'm still grappling with it. Like I find myself having to challenge myself not to do something. Like this is the day of rest. This is the day the Lord gave us to rest, and here I am trying to do a million things before my Monday. It's almost like a pre-Monday versus
I hear
giving
you.
myself the gift of rest. And that I think is one of the other things that is an outspurt of being the first and doing so many things and taking care of so many people, and you always have an endless to-do list. And I just think that one of the things I'm really working on as an adult, as a leader, as a parent, as a human being is just normalizing that rest is also
I'm learning with
a
you.
reset, you
I'm
know.
learning with you.
Mhm.
Yesterday after church, I came home and looked at my calendar, and I had a full calendar starting from 3 p.m. all the way till 9 p.m. A full calendar. And I just started thinking, do I have to do this? There was one meeting at 7 o'clock that I had to take, which was a board meeting, but all the other
Good
stuff,
question.
like, can I put this off till tomorrow? And I decided this is what I'm going to do one thing that is really important out of all of this stuff. And I had to get a letter out by today. It had to be,
Hmm.
I said, that's the thing I'm going to focus on. I'm going to get this letter, all the documentation that I had to send with it. And I'm not doing anything else until my board meeting at 7 o'clock.
That's
And
right.
I felt so guilty after a while. I picked up this book. Well, I have these books on my phone and they haven't been read. Like, I download all the Audible stuff. Do I read them? No. And I said, I'm going to start one of these books. And one was from my friend, a good friend of mine. She's a publisher and she actually wrote a book and it's been sitting there for like 2 years. I said, I'm at least going to start that. So I got to up to like one chapter
Nice.
and then I picked up a different book, which was more of a romance kind of thing, which I'm like, okay, this is light reading just to like
Hmm.
use your brain, not think things that you don't have to think about.
Yeah.
Read a chapter. And before you knew it, I was going through my phone, uh, responding to friends who were just talking on Facebook or commenting on people's. I never take time to do that.
Right.
Just commenting on, hey, that's nice. How was this? And I was like, oh my God. Then I turned around, it was 7 o'clock. But I felt rejuvenated.
Right.
It was a different kind of not going to work, looking at my calendar, making sure I got this for tomorrow, and talking to my husband. Okay, what's your thing tomorrow? Like none of that. At 9 o'clock, I looked at my calendar after my board meeting was done and said, okay, he has PT today, and we'll go to PT, but I'm going to try to really work hard at doing that.
Yes. Just keep making those choices. And I think you got to prioritize that time for yourself on your calendar. I say prioritize your peace. I mean, and you can
A good thing.
see
I like that.
how
Prioritize the peace.
yeah, and that then, it creates a different way of you being in the world, right?
Yeah.
Because you made that choice to focus on you versus do all the things that are still going to be there tomorrow for you to do. So,
So, how are you giving back now that you've acquired all this knowledge and all this wisdom and you've been through, being the first? How do you give this back and try to make an impact on the next generation?
well, that's a beautiful question. I mean, I think I don't hide, the hard parts, right? I think sometimes one of the things that we do is we tend to like sometimes sweep things that don't work under the rug, or we try to do things all on ourselves. So I was that person before, and I now speak more openly with my own sisters who are part of the extended network of individuals who provide support to my parents now because my mom had a stroke in June and my dad has dementia. And so while I still carry the bulk of the responsibility
I
with
think we
regards,
have the same parents.
yeah, the bulk of the responsibility with the caretaking, I don't now just keep that all to myself because I was becoming a very um angry and frustrated and festered individual. And so I did share my truth with my sisters. And so we are trying to do better at dividing and conquering and I think my nieces who are in that sort of WhatsApp group with us, they get to bear witness to what we're trying to do to just ensure that we stay healthy, right? My to bear witness to your heroes slowly but surely, although it's a gift for them to still be alive, but watch their fragility and notice how they go through their season of becoming older. And it is like again a gift, but it's also like, wow, like I get to see how they are shifting and changing, how they're becoming more fragile,
Yeah.
including in their mental cognition. And so there are some commitments that I have definitely made to myself with regards to how I want to age based off what I'm navigating and bearing witness to in their process, right? That includes making healthier choices around what I'm putting into my body. Do I have a drink or two every now and again? Absolutely. Lord knows I need it, but there are it's just, it's not the go-to thing, for me at least,
Yeah.
with regards to how I caretake for myself. So that's the one thing, like just being more mindful of, trying not to cast so much judgment, but more so being mindful of how I can live a healthier life, asking for support when I need it. And not trying to wait until I get to the point where I'm festered and frustrated, like
Right.
letting them know, like, this is going down, y'all. I'm gonna need some help around this. And then delegation, which is, some what we need to do sometimes even in our businesses and in our personal relationships and in our workplaces. You can't do all the things.
You
You cannot
cannot.
because,
You cannot.
things will fall apart if you think you could do all the things. And
You'll fall
so
apart. You will
including
fall
yourself.
apart.
So I have delegated some of the responsibilities, particularly around ordering food to my middle sister, and then my youngest sister caretakes for the appointments while I deal with some of the, day-to-day stuff with the home attendant. So, it's just like
Right.
before I was doing it all. And so to the next generation, I say that, we can't do everything, right? Like learn how to be supported, learn how to ask for support,
Let
and
me tell
learn
you,
how to receive support. I think is really
home
important.
attendants are the godsend of
They
this.
are. They are.
I know with my father, he also has starting beginnings of dementia.
Hmm.
And the home attendants, I feel so comfortable when you find a good one,
That's
just
right.
like treat them well, you
That's
know.
right.
I will overpay. I don't care. Just
Yeah.
knowing that he has someone who's going to help him do all the things that he does and He loves them just like other. If they don't show up or they have to take a day off, he's quite upset. Like, this is
Sure.
my routine and my
They
friends.
become family.
Yes, they do. That's the thing. They become your family because they're taking care of a precious person for you. And
Absolutely.
there's no amount of money that can replace that. And that allows you and me to go do our thing that
Hmm.
we're doing and not worry and not, sweat it out that things are not going okay. So, yeah, oh my God, home attendants are like the best.
Yeah, they are. They allow us to have peace and for us to be able to lead and continue to live our lives, but also know that our loved ones are being caretaken for and, the way that we want them to be. So,
Now,
absolutely.
have you, and this is a weird, have you thought about your life when you're their age? Like, have you put stuff into place for your life for the future?
Financially, yes. Like I was always, when I was, when I've been working, always make sure I had the set aside. So from the financial retirement place, yes, for myself. And, with designation, yes. But what I think in full transparency, I could get better at is just making sure it's not just known to me, right? Like I need to be
Yep.
able to ensure that, if God forbid something happens to me yesterday, that there is information and whereabouts and known
Right.
about what are the things that, I need you all to take care of for
I
my
was looking,
children
I
in
was
the
looking for
event
a
that's,
book.
something happens. And I think there's some stuff that has come up on Instagram because Lord knows these phones are listening to us. And I'm sure when I'm done with this podcast, I'll get an advertisement for that, like that book, because there's this book that they now have advertised where you put all the things in
Yes,
organized
I have
fashion.
it. I have
Okay.
it. It's just
So,
go online. It's like 9.99. You could go on Amazon. I bought one for my mom, my dad.
yeah.
I have this stuff. I have my stuff now. I've started.
Okay.
You got to keep it updated though.
So
That's
I've been eyeing it because I am that person for my parents. Like my mom
go
got
get
me
it.
ready from a very young age. And she was like, if something ever happens to me or as I start to get older, you are the one, the designee that
Yes.
needs to know where all the keys to the vault are at.
Especially passwords. It's not even keys
Yeah,
anymore. It's those
I know,
passwords,
right?
girl, that
Exactly.
will kill
So,
you.
absolutely. So yes, and I have to, do better at ensuring that I have it organized.
Yes. And I keep looking at my will because I updated it and then, your life changes. I'm like, oh God, I need to update my will. So that's another thing I have to put on my list to get done because as
Absolutely.
you make changes or things happen in your life,
Life is lifing.
sometimes it's living. And sometimes you have to cross something out. Now there's a grandchild who's next generation. So do I add that in? Or
Right,
like all
right.
of these things you have to just stay on top of. And it's work.
Yes,
It's work,
indeed.
but it's
Indeed.
necessary work
Yeah.
because it makes life easier for the people, who are around you.
And I think that's an important point. Like, as much as we caretake as women for others, our children, our partners, and whoever those people are for you, we have to make sure we stay steadfast on ensuring we're good stewards for our own,
Yes,
well-being and financials and future, right? So I think what I hear you saying is a call forth for us to ensure we do that, right? Because we can so
absolutely.
focus over there that we forget again to put that
Take care of
oxygen
ourselves.
mask and do care for ourselves like that. So thank you for raising that as something that we all need to be mindful of.
So what's next for you and in your life?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say continuing to build this coaching women of color empire. I definitely have quite a few things that I'm ideating right now. Namely, I'd love to continue taking on individual clients, but one of the things I'm looking to get into from a visioning perspective is do more corporate work, right? So if there's any listeners out there who are looking forward to having a dynamic team development facilitator come in and just make sure that I do move any sort of, I would say, roadblocks or barriers that you've had in your team development process. Please feel free to reach out to me. I have a newsletter that I started, a monthly newsletter called Leading While Walk, which is a
Okay.
play on leading while Black, but leading while being a woman of color, that I just started it last month on LinkedIn. So that's a place where people can come and get insights and nuggets and wisdom. And I have a new feature that I'll be putting out within the next week, specifically around helping organizations and leaders in this current climate, because there's a lot of shifts and changes and attacks on DEI. And I know a lot of leaders are
Daily.
wondering, how do they create a sense of belonging for their teams in the midst of that? So I'm going to be putting together some frameworks and conversations around that. And then big picture, I would love to do an app, right? Like I've thought long and hard around sort of launching an app specifically for women of color, right? And what I'm looking at doing is creating an opportunity for them to like get on the moment in like real time, just wisdoms or nuggets or things that are going to help us regulate our nervous system. There's so much that's being thrown
Okay.
at us. And so I'm thinking ideally around it being both something that can support them with career gems, but also things that will help support their wellness, because we need to be well in our careers.
Right.
um,
Right.
and then I think the two other things that are sort of ideating, because I also give back to young ladies. I have two young ladies right now that I'm coaching pro bono, just as a support to them. And I'm trying to find ways to give back to young girls, right, that are in needs of guidance, in need of leadership support. And so I've long thought around creating an academy for different models, right? Like one for entry level young ladies who are seeking to sort of build their career acumen and figuring out how to navigate, because I didn't have a lot of that. I had to kind of figure it out. And then people who are at the middle level, who are sort of thinking about what's next for me and how do I move up to C-suite role. And then something that could be more for the C-suite level in terms of board navigation and sort of the politics, because it's different up there, the
Yes.
air, right? So like
Yes.
thinking about the various tiers. And then the very last thing, because you asked me, Sandy, I've been thinking about all of this because I'm talking about empire, is I would love, 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 love to create a retreat center that is dedicated for the needs of women in particular, in my island home of the Dominican Republic,
Hey,
because
nice, nice over there.
we need holistic wellness. And if you've ever been to Kripalu in the Berkshires, it is a
Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful facility. And I was so moved and so inspired when I went there. But the also thing I noticed is that they don't have a lot of people that look like you and me that
correct.
participate in Kripalu.
But
And
is that because I can't say they don't advertise to us, but our mindset sometimes is not to go to those kind of places. And I was at that point when it was just kind of frou-frou, woo-woo kind of stuff. But it's necessary and it's
so
time.
necessary.
And if you have that like on the beach, like in DR, girl,
Yes. And I'm
I'm
looking
coming.
for a facility because I don't want to rotate into different retreats, which I know a lot of people do. I'm looking to have an establishment where this is a haven, a sanctuary for us. So, I mean, I've given you sort of like the 10 the 10-year vision of the
Yeah.
small, the big, the day to day, but that's what's next for me. I'm
Can you
literally.
buy land in DR?
Oh, absolutely. And I just got my dual citizenship, which will facilitate me being able to buy, and I think get tax breaks. And so, that's what's next, Sandy.
I
That's what's
can't
next.
wait. You got to invite me when all this happens. I
Yes,
love DR. I've been there so many times, but I
yeah.
will be there. Oh my gosh, that would
Now,
be
this podcast is an accountability tool, because once
okay.
you put things into the universe, people be like, "You remember when you said that on
That.
Dr. Sandy's web podcast?" On April 28th. Where is it? Right?
That's
So
right.
that's
I will
yeah.
remember every time I look at DR or packages, I'm like, I could be having a package to Wendy's.
Yes, to the retreat center. So
Yeah.
we working on it. We're working on it.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
on and sharing all this information with us and just letting me get to know a little bit about you and how your firsts are impacting people because it happens to all of us. We have these
Yes.
firsts. That's why I started this podcast, and no one knows, how we developed into who we are. And a lot of it is because we have these firsts, right?
Absolutely.
So thank
Beautiful.
you
No,
so
thank you.
much.
Thank you for having me. I love this.
All righty. Well, I hope we can come back again sometime in the future, Wendy.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All righty.
All right. Bye-bye.
This is Dr. Sandy. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on the first, where no two stories are alike, even if the circumstances are similar. Let this discussion serve as inspiration for others to show what's possible, and more importantly, to produce seconds and thirds.